Georgia, Georgia, the whole day through. Just an old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind. Georgia on my
mind. In April 2004, Ray Charles, the legendary musician simply dubbed the Genius among his peers and fans, attended a ceremony in Los Angeles commemorating the declaration of RPM International, the recording studio where he recorded many of his classic hits over the years, as a historic landmark in the city. Visibly frail but still exuding the trademark charm and vitality that endeared him to the public, Charles addressed the crowd with gratitude and basked in the affection and admiration from the city that had been his creative home for so many years. But although his health troubles were obvious, Ray Charles remained the consummate artist, and aside from attending a few occasions celebrating his career, preferred working in the studio on new music, which he continued to do on his most recent collaboration of duets with a raft of artists like Norah Jones, Elton John, Willie Nelson, Van Morrison, Gladys Knight, and more. The album, fittingly entitled Genius Loves Company, would become his final love note to his fans and fellow musicians. Charles's health had been declining for months, the result of acute liver disease likely brought on by decades of drug abuse, and his concomitant declines presented a stark contrast to the powerful vitality that had defined his performances for over 5 decades. By the spring of 2004, his condition had worsened to the point where he was forced to cancel what would have been a celebratory farewell tour. For someone who had spent his entire life on the road and prided himself on a sort of old-school the show must go on professionalism, the concession was monumental. But Charles wasn't one to go quietly, and although he could no longer soldier through a rigorous touring schedule, his artistic restlessness never abandoned him. The Genius Loves Company duet project wasn't just a creative endeavor, it was a testament to his enduring influence, uniting generations of musicians in one last powerful collaboration. His musical legacy is virtually unparalleled. Blending gospel, jazz, R&B, and even country music, Ray Charles didn't just cross genre boundaries, he obliterated them. His 1960 hit, Georgia on My Mind, became the definitive anthem of soul, a timeless ballad that still resonates as a cultural touchstone. But Ray Charles was more than just a musician. He was an activist, refusing to play in segregated venues in the 1960s, and becoming a symbol of Black resilience and empowerment. His influence wasn't confined to music charts. It shaped pop culture at large. Whether it was his groundbreaking appearance on Saturday Night Live, his unforgettable cameo in the Blues Brothers, or even his memorable Pepsi commercials in the early 90s that somehow sidestepped the label of selling out that dogged so many of his contemporaries. Ray Charles' charisma and talent seemed to exist on a different plane from others in his profession. He seemed to tower above even the brightest lights in the music industry, a fact that was never more apparent than when he shared studio space with countless legends during the recording of We Are the World in 1985, when he was feted as a living legend, inducing awe and reverence from everyone from Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, Bruce Springsteen, and even Bob Dylan. But on June 10, 2004, Ray Charles passed away in his Beverly Hills home due to complications resulting from liver failure, leaving behind an unmatched legacy of brilliance and a reminder that even in our final days, creativity can burn brightly. Ray Charles was 73 years old. I'm Derek Kaufman.
I'm Jason Beckerman.
And this is Last Days, Ray Charles.
Although he'd been in failing health for several months before he passed, it did nothing to dim the outpouring of grief and tributes at the news of his passing. Several musicians and other celebrities immediately expressed their sadness about the legend's death. Tony Bennett, a longtime friend and collaborator with Charles, reflected on the multi-generational impact of Charles and lamented his passing, saying, quote, "It's a big loss. Heaven's going to have a great time up there with Ray Charles, believe me." Billy Joel was even more effusive in his praise, describing Charles as musically more important than Elvis and pointing to his profound influence on countless singers, from Rod Stewart and Joe Cocker to Steve Winwood. Elton John, another legend in his own right who recorded a duet with Charles for the Genius Loves Company album, said working with Charles was, quote, "one of the greatest honors of my life." Stevie Wonder praised Charles as a huge inspiration and credited him with breaking down barriers in music and society more broadly. Even contemporary artists at the time, like Norah Jones and Kenny Chesney, paid their respects, with Jones calling their collaboration on his posthumous duets album surreal and humbling, noting how Charles shared his amassed wisdom and enduring charm during the recording of the song Here We Go Again.
Here we go again. The phone will ring again. I'll be her fool again. I will. One more time.
Well, I've been there before.
Released posthumously, the album Genius Loves Company would go on to win 8 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year, ensuring that Charles's impact would extend far beyond his lifetime. As for Charles's funeral itself, the singer was laid to rest at the Inglewood Park Cemetery following services at the First African Methodist Episcopal Church of Los Angeles a little over a week after his death. Several musical figures were in attendance, with B.B. King, Glenn Campbell, Stevie Wonder, and Wynton Marsalis each paying a tribute.
You know, Jason, 2004 was earlier than sort of the social media movement where you could find all of the tributes every time a celebrity dies. But still, the caliber of the people commenting on Ray Charles's death and what they had to say about him, you've got...
It's a who's who. If you take a 3-decade span from 1970 through 2000, you're talking about the biggest musical acts in the world.
bowing to him. Elton John is a massive superstar. Billy Joel,
Stevie
like that,
Wonder, Tony Bennett. I mean, these are huge names.
Everyone kissed the ring of...
And then Norah Jones somehow slides into that.
And Norah Jones did that.
Norah Jones.
did that duet as well. Some of them didn't have quite the lasting impact of Ray Charles. But in any event, this also happened because his passing occurred just 5 days after the death of Ronald Reagan and coincided with the former president's funeral. Many media outlets linked to the grieving over both men by replaying Charles's iconic rendition of America the Beautiful, which he'd first performed at Reagan's second inaugural gala.
I'm talking about this America. America. May God like gold refine. Till all success be nobleness and every gain divine. And you know, when I was a little boy, I always remember we sung these words.
This is obviously just a snippet of the performance, but really do yourself a favor, watch that whole clip on YouTube if you have time. It's a genuinely stirring moment. Reagan has obviously become a very different cultural icon with the passage of time, but his landslide victory in 1984 was a profound moment in American history, and regardless of your politics, it's hard not to be moved by Ray Charles singing at the inauguration. He was this unifying cultural figure who bridged racial divides in music and more broadly in society. And Ronald Reagan's reputation is obviously more fraught, but there was an element of him being a creation of the entertainment industry that also stood for these aspirational values at the time.
I just want to talk about the song for a second. I'm familiar. I've heard his rendition of that song 100 times, but I don't know that I ever knew that it was from Reagan's funeral. Is that the first time he played it from what you researched?
No, he had other times where he played America the Beautiful, but that is the most stirring rendition. And
Got
so
it.
when you often hear it played, they're playing that one from the second inauguration.
It's second to none. I mean,
It's incredible.
He had a voice that was very specific. It was a certain type of voice, but in that sort of genre, that deep bluesy raspy thing, there's maybe nobody with a greater voice in the history of music than Ray Charles, and he brought it all to that rendition and to that song generally. And
Yeah,
that rendition is special, obviously.
When you think of patriotic anthems, you've got Whitney Houston's at the Super
Right,
Bowl.
right.
You've got Marvin Gaye's at the All-Star game.
Toby Keith.
Maybe Toby Keith
yeah.
comes in there. And then you have this Ray Charles, America the Beautiful. And I find that song so much more beautiful and moving than the sort of the regular anthem.
Yeah.
So it's really just an incredible thing. It stirs a lot of emotions. Let's go ahead and take a quick break and more on the legacy of Ray Charles when we come back. The term genius is thrown around quite loosely in the music world. It's been thrown around since the classical era when Mozart and Beethoven carried the label. And sometimes it's used to describe musicians at the leading edge of innovation, like David Bowie, Prince, and even Kanye West. And you don't even need a good voice to get the word attached to your name, as in the case of someone like Bob Dylan. But most so-called geniuses have a prickly quality to them, perhaps because it's mildly annoying to operate at a level so far beyond the reach of mere mortals. Few are endearingly referred to as genius in their lifetime and thought of in affectionate terms. One would maybe be Albert Einstein, who's one of the brightest minds in the history of humanity, but seemed lovable with that wild hair and affable personality. And the other is Ray Charles, who was lovingly dubbed the genius by virtually everyone in the music industry. Born in Georgia in 1930 and raised in Florida, Charles overcame nearly insurmountable challenges, including losing his sense of sight from glaucoma at the age of 7 and the loss of both parents by the time he was 15 years old. And through it all, music became his lifeline. And if you think it's hyperbole to call him a genius, you should look no further than how he learned to play classical pieces of Bach, Mozart, and Beethoven through the use of Braille music, an extraordinarily difficult process that involves reading Braille with the right hand while playing piano with your left, and then reading Braille with your left hand while playing piano with your right hand, and then learning to combine the two parts into a seamless harmony. I did some research on this. It's incredibly difficult. It's hard.
It sounds difficult.
It's hard enough to learn Braille,
right.
but to
learn, it's hard enough to play Mozart.
Yes.
It's hard enough to, and then do it one hand at a time I can't even get my head around it.
It's staggering. And truly, you have to be a genius level sort of savant when it comes to music. I mean, Stevie Wonder also has this attribute, learned in the same way, but to put the process together in the way that they did, it's truly incredible. And he quickly built a reputation as a talented musician in Florida, modeling himself on the career of Nat King Cole and sort of infusing gospel, jazz, country, and pop elements to develop his own distinctive sound. In 1954, it all paid off with the recording of his first big hit, I've Got a Woman.
Well, I got a woman way over town that's good to me. Oh yeah, say I got a woman way over town, good to me. Oh yeah, she give me money when I'm in need. Yeah, she's a kind of friend indeed. I got a woman way over town that's good to me.
The song reached number 2 on the R&B chart and became one of Charles's signature hits, although younger audiences will probably remember when it was sampled by Kanye West with an assist from Jamie Foxx for his hit in 2005, Gold Digger.
She take my money when I'm in need. Yes, she's a trifling friend indeed. Oh, she's a gold digger way over town that digs on me. She give me money.
Now I ain't saying she a gold digger, but she ain't messing with no broke. Now I ain't saying she a gold digger.
But Ray Charles was just hitting his stride, and by the dawn of the 1960s, he inked a massive deal with ABC Paramount and immediately got to work on a string of hits, including 3 number ones, just before the British invasion took over the pop charts. His first massive hit, Georgia on My Mind, was played at the top of this podcast and has become a standard. The song received national acclaim and helped Charles land 4 Grammy Awards, including Best Male Vocal Performance and Best Performance by a Pop Single Artist. His version even became the official state song of Georgia in 1979. It has been covered countless times, including a version by Willie Nelson in the late 70s, and also went on to number 1 on the charts and routinely cracks the top 50 in lists compiling the greatest songs of all time. And if there was any thought of a sophomore slump after such a massive hit, Charles dispelled any concerns with his follow-up track in 1961 that may be his most famous song of all.
Hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack. And don't you come back no more.
What you say?
Hit the road, Jack. And don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack. And don't you come back no more.
Oh woman, don't treat me so mean. You're the meanest old woman that I've ever seen. I guess if you say so.
It still stands as one of the most famous call and answer songs of all time and can still be heard in sports stadiums and arenas every time a player gets ejected.
Jason, we asked our younger producer, Branson, if he knew Ray Charles, and Admittedly, he said he's not an artist who really comes across all that often, but everyone knows Hit the Road Jack. If you go to a stadium, someone fouls out, you hear Hit the Road Jack. That song is so enduring in sports arenas, and it feels like part of the fabric of America.
I have to tell you, it is. What you're saying is totally true. I think Georgia on My Mind is equally sort of resonant. I mean, that's a song that everybody knows, and it's also been in a lot of commercials, been covered by contemporary artists and artists like Willie Nelson, who are not quite contemporaries anymore. But you know, these are it's a testament to him. Like these songs have a legacy that extends way beyond. I mean, you're talking, you know, there's few artists who were around in the 60s whose music is still well known. The Beatles, obviously, are the classic example. The Stones. Ray Charles is among them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty incredible that those songs are still so resonant today. The Chantels even released an answer song called Well, I Told You, which climbed all the way to number 29 on the charts. His last number one hit, I Can't Stop Loving You, in 1963, ended up topping the charts for 5 weeks and nabbing Charles another Grammy Award for Best Rhythm and Blues Recording.
I can't stop loving you. It's useless to say, so I'll just live my life in dreams of yesterdays.
The song has been recorded by more than 700 artists, including country legends like Dolly Parton and Conway Twitty, and crooners like Paul Anka and Frank Sinatra, but none as successfully as Charles. It's one of the best examples of this music truism. When Ray Charles covers a song, it usually becomes his song.
Remarkably, Ray Charles experienced the peak of his commercial success during the depths of his addiction to heroin. He first tried marijuana at 18, later claiming he thought the drug helped musicians tap into their creativity. But his expansion into heroin proved much, much more damaging to his life. Charles was first arrested in 1955 after he was caught with marijuana and drug paraphernalia, including a burnt spoon, syringe, and needle. And as he became more successful, the habit only grew. He had more money, and he was arrested again in 1958, 1961, and 1965 for similar drug-related offenses. And shortly after the final arrest, he decided to quit cold turkey as part of a reduced sentence for his crimes. But despite kicking the heroin habit, Ray assumed more of an Amy Winehouse-esque confrontational position in his music, releasing songs like I Don't Need No Doctor and Let's Get Stoned on his first album after getting sober. But it does seem his addictive behavior shifted after he got the drugs under control, with Charles turning to women instead of heroin. And this is the other thing that people know about Ray Charles. He loved women.
Largely based on the movie with Jamie Foxx,
Yes.
right? What year was that, 2005 or so?
Yes.
And it's played up both his heroin addiction and his famous sort of running around that he did for a long time.
Absolutely. And in his 1978 autobiography, Charles said, quote, cigarettes and smack are the two truly addictive habits I've known. You might add women. My obsession centers on women. Did then and does now. I can't leave them alone. He was married only twice, but had many, many relationships with women over the years and fathered a dozen children with 10 different women. In 2002, he hosted a family luncheon for the kids, telling them he was terminally ill and that $500,000 had been set aside in trusts for each of them.
Although his chart success declined in the 70s and 80s with the British invasion and rise of psychedelic and hard rock, he managed to stay cool and relevant throughout this period, recording a version of Stevie Wonder's hit Living for the City in 1975, and even hosting SNL in 1977. By the 80s, Charles was already a living legend and settled into a phase of recording country albums and duets with singers like George Jones, Hank Williams Jr., and longtime friend Willie Nelson. He also pitched in on the charity single We Are the World in 1985, helping out his old friend, Quincy Jones, by providing the anchor leg for the song that featured soaring vocals from the biggest stars in music.
There's a choice we're making. We're saving our own lives. It's true, we make a better day. Just you and me. Good God. We are the children. We are the children. We are the ones who make a better day. So let's start here.
You know, I mentioned this before. There's lots of behind-the-scenes footage from the recording of We Are the World, and it's just amazing to see huge celebrities get absolutely starstruck when in the presence of Ray Charles. This room had everyone. It had Diana Ross, Michael Jackson, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, so many more stars of today and the past and present. And yet the most magnetic presence when he walked into the room is Ray Charles.
Yeah.
Because everyone was just in awe of him. And he got that anchor leg of the song. If you listen to the song, obviously Bruce Springsteen has a great solo. Other artists have very iconic parts of that song. But he wraps it up. And that really is a testament to they knew they were in the presence of a genius. And even though Bob Dylan is the poet laureate of rockers, Ray Charles gets the anchor leg.
It really is. This was not homage to an old man. He was still a relatively young man. He wasn't sickly at all at the time, but they recognized that the genius, obviously, the person who others had dubbed as the genius that was in the room. I mean, Quincy Jones, obviously a genius in his own right. Michael Jackson is at the time the biggest star in the world, bar none. But still, they deferred to this older guy who still could bring it. And he is incredible in that song.
It's so good. It's so good. And for the younger generations, or I guess not that young anymore, Ray Charles still had one more trick up his sleeve when he starred in one of the most famous Pepsi commercials in 1991.
You know when it's right. You know when you feel it, baby. You hold it, you hear it, you taste it, it's right. You got the right one, baby. Uncontestably tasteable and intimately wonderful. You got the right one, baby. Oh, yeah.
Jason, I'm sure you remember that. You've got the right one, baby. It was omnipresent in life.
Yeah.
And to me, what's remarkable about the commercial is how cool it was, even at the time. And this was an era when selling out was verboten.
Right.
The
Celebrities
Stones,
who did the big commercial endorsements for the giant companies were called sellouts.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And they paid a consequence commercially. I remember artists like the Rolling Stones were starting to use their music a little in commercials, and they would pay a price for that at times. There would be softer record sales and so forth. And many artists feared using their music in commercials at all or being associated with big companies, because it sort of hurt your credibility or what have you. I think this is now sort of a quaint notion.
Yes.
This doesn't exist really
In the
anymore,
world of
but it
Donald
was a
Trump
big deal.
2.0, like this kind of thing just isn't even talked about anymore.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now we have the president selling colognes
Right.
and water.
No
and stuff.
shade. It just is what it is. There's the mentality towards selling out. Now it is really about like make as much money as you can at all costs. Then it was very different.
It was
Yeah.
very, very different. But for Ray Charles, he was just beyond reproach and somehow made hawking like sugar water seem hip and cool. There was something about that commercial where you're like, okay, because it's Ray Charles, I love it.
Right.
And although he only lived to the relatively young age of 73, Ray Charles got to enjoy his status as a living legend for decades before he passed. His prolific musical career, comprising more than 60 original albums and more than 200 compilations, stands as a testament to his greatness and his genre-spanning contributions to gospel, jazz, soul, country, and pop music over 5+ decades truly puts him in some pretty rare and special company. In terms of breadth and influence, there aren't too many people who can stack up with Ray Charles, but one person might be his friend and collaborator, Quincy Jones, who just passed away in November. Both men were titans of the music industry who influenced countless artists across several generations, but they were also close friends. And so I thought it only fitting to give Quincy the final word in this episode, heard here celebrating the work and lifetime achievements of Ray Charles during the Kennedy Center Honors in 1986.
He took call and response of the gospel, and he crossed it with the pain and the heartache of the blues. And I mean, he pushed the blues face to face with each other and married the two, and it has never been done quite like that since or before. But Ray did it.